Isaiah chapter 30, and then we're going to run over to Matthew chapter 24. All these papers I got in my hands here, I hope I can sort through all that and make sense here without spending too much time looking for what it is why I printed these articles. That's what I'm praying for, so you pray about that. I printed these articles out and brought them because I didn't have time to go through it like I would normally do and pull out what I wanted. So I got to remember where it is. I want to get that off my mind so I can think about this. Isaiah chapter 30. Look at Isaiah chapter 30 together with me. And we're going to find, begin at verse number 8. Now go, write it before them in a table and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever. What did God want written down and noted for us to remember today? That this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things. Speak unto us smooth things. Prophesy deceits. Get you out of the way. Turn aside out of the path. Cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. Wow. Wherefore thus saith the Holy One of Israel, because ye despise this word, and trust in oppression and perverseness, and stay thereon, therefore this iniquity shall be to you as a breach ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall, whose breaking cometh suddenly at an instant. Father, help me to preach now clearly the message you have for us. I ask you for that help in Jesus' name. Amen. And now open your Bible over to Matthew chapter 24. Wait for me. I'll be there in a moment. You may be seated, by the way. I'm sorry. Amen. That's why I went ahead and prayed. I thought somebody out there needed to sit down. All right, Matthew 24. Matthew 24. And we're going to look at verse 22 here in just a little bit. Oh, no, that was this morning for Bible study. I'm sorry. We're going to be looking at verses, verse 7 particularly, but probably 5 through about 9, somewhere in there. All right, let me set this up. We notice in Isaiah chapter number 30, the Lord has rebuked severely his people with a rebuke he intended would kind of hang on them, like put this accusation around your neck and wear it for the rest of time. He's very unhappy with his people. And he tells them, and here's what he's unhappy about. They are saying to the seer, that would be the prophet who reveals a message from God or a vision or a dream, and they're saying to the seer, we don't want to hear anything from you about God. We don't want any revelations from God coming from you. And to the preacher, the prophesier, they're saying, look, we don't want to hear your negative preaching. Just speak to us smooth things. You know? Amen. And people like Joel Osteen said, okay. That's what they've done. And listen to this. The people were saying to the preachers, get out of the way. Turn aside out of the path. Wow. Listen to this one. Cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. They wanted preachers who would get God out of their life. Wow. Isn't that something? And he goes on, and so the Holy One of Israel responds to this and says, because you despise the word and so on. Listen to this part, verse number 12. You trust in oppression and perverseness and stay thereon. Does that not describe us today? Not you and me, but you know, the state of Christianity today. They want preaching that gets God out of their way so they can do what they want to do. That's what they want. And they are actually encouraging the preachers, you know, what, in different ways, encouraging the preachers to make the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. This is unreal. And what always happens when that develops among God's people, what always happens is the oppressors rise in strength. The oppressors rise up and become more and more strong in that culture. That's what's happening in America. And the people tend to turn and trust in oppression. They trust in oppression. Oppression will save us. Socialism will save us. Socialism is oppression. Socialism will save us. They trust in oppression. And then and in perverseness. They believe that perversity is like liberty. They think that's their liberty. That's their idea of what liberty is perversity. Well, that's what's happened. Now we come over to Matthew chapter 24, and we see this. We'll put it all together, I hope, when I come toward the end of the message this evening. It says, and he sat upon the Mount of Olives, verse 3. Let's go on down. He warns in verse 5, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation. And that's reflexive. In other words, without trying to get too complex here, when you read from verse 6 into verse 7, you're continuing to read about those things Jesus said would come. That's what you're doing. He's kind of fleshing it out, as it were. He makes a statement. You're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. Don't be troubled. These things must occur, must come to pass. The end isn't yet. For, and now he's fleshing out what he just said. You see that? You know what I mean? All right, so he's saying, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now, I brought this out in my show. I brought it out. I touched on it at the end of my message this morning. Let me just kind of begin with the conclusion so I can make sure if I don't make it to the conclusion, you've got the conclusion. Okay, we're good. What does Jesus say about pestilence? If you ask Jesus, Lord, what's your opinion about this COVID-19 thing? What do you say about it? Here's his answer. There will be pestilences. You can also expect famines, wars, rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. These are the beginning of sorrows. That's what he would say. Now, if they're the beginning of the sorrows, that means they're not the end of the sorrows. Which is not good news, because that means we have more sorrows to come. But the side of this that's good news is, these are just beginning pains. Have you ever heard of Braxton Hicks? Every woman here said, yep, if they've got a kid. That's it's an experience that is, I understand. By the way, I've never had it. I'm not one of those kind of men. But anyway, it's one of those experiences a woman has where she thinks, or it feels like labor has the onset of labor. But it isn't. They call it false labor. And so I've heard stories of young brides getting pregnant and experiencing their first Braxton Hicks episode and stirring up the whole house. Oh, no, here it is. And everybody's all excited and suitcases are being grabbed and people are running out the door, only to realize, no, false alarm. Well, that's kind of what this is. These things Jesus told us about, they do tell us what's coming, but they don't signify what has come. In other words, these things they remind us, the end's coming. They do remind us, the end's coming, but they do not signal the end has come. Make sense? So this stuff is like Braxton Hicks, in the sense that people react to it as if, the end has come, when it hasn't come yet. Jesus' answer to the issue here is that, well, these things should be noted as what I told you would happen. But that's just the beginning of sorrow. Which tells me that when a famine comes, a famine will pass. Another famine will come later. When an earthquake comes, the earthquake will pass. Another earthquake will come later. When a war comes along, a war will come and a war will go. Pestilences come and pestilences go. The concern is we wouldn't want to suggest that, oh, well, then ignore it. No, pay attention. Jesus said this would happen. These things mean the earth's in trouble and the world's moving toward the end. Just keep in mind that these things happening do not mean the end has come. Amen? Does that help? Okay, hopefully it gives you a little perspective. Let's go ahead and talk about this COVID-19 business. I have found that when something does not make sense, it's a good idea to ask yourself, what sense does this make? I go to the store over here, and it's like, where did the toilet paper go? What in the world? What's with the toilet paper? This particular flu doesn't create that particular problem. Well, it doesn't. So I don't. What's the toilet paper about? You're gone. The shelves are bare. Water, boom, gone. You can't find water anymore. Now, I'm all for buying water. I have to be careful here because I don't want to sound like I'm critical of people who felt like, better stock up on toilet paper. I happen to be a person with a great deal of sensitivity in that matter. I do have some sensitivity. When I first went to Russia, they didn't have any. Okay? Oh, I don't even want to tell you. I don't. It was not pretty. Fortunately, the people who advised me and sent me on that trip knew what was going on in Russia, so they said, take extra toilet paper and take jars of peanut butter. Now, at the time, I'm thinking, yeah, well, okay, you advised me to do that, so I'll do that. Honestly, I didn't appreciate why that was so important until I got there. And the first time I visited one of their public restrooms was like, I just turned around and walked out. I said, oh, man, I'm going to hold this. Mercy. I don't want to get, it would be entertaining. We could spend the rest of the message just telling you various stories. I won't do that, but and then when they did have toilet paper, it literally had wood chips in it. I kid you not, you could get a splinter. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. That's true, though. They told us you'd roll it out and you'd crack it, because, anyway, I'm done. So I happen to be a person that understands, have some extra toilet paper around the house. I get that. I know, I understand. So I'm not being critical of anybody. I'm not even being critical of somebody who's loading up with water. It's just that that's a little bit bizarre. I mean, you can't find it anywhere. I think this thing kind of snowballs. I think what happens is somebody or some buddies, enough people go, got to get some extra water. And it's not a big panic thing. But then when somebody comes in, they see somebody loading water. They go, honey, we better get some water. So they go grab a cart and they start loading. And somebody sees 3 people loading. Man, we better get some water. And then it just builds up and becomes this huge thing. One thing good about water, it has a good shelf life. So whoever bought a lot of water, God bless you. I want to know who you are so that if it does become a problem, I know where to go. Okay, I'm just kidding around. Trying to balance it out and to be appropriate in the whole matter. I don't mind. It's none of my business if somebody wants to buy a lot of water. I just wonder what's driving it. What's driving that? I think there are better ways to prepare for emergency sources of water, but in any event, can we get off the water thing? Oh yeah, sure we can. Okay, we're done. All right, so my point is, where is this coming from? I remember the swine flu. How many of you remember the swine flu? None of this happened. None of it. Nobody did a run on water. Nobody did a run on toilet paper or other paper products. I just don't get the paper product thing. It's just weird. Even your towels and gone. I guess they figure if they run out of toilet paper, they're going. I don't know what. I can't get off that for some reason. I'm fixating. But where's that coming from? If something doesn't make sense, you ask yourself, what's the sense of that? right? What is driving this? What is going on here? Something's going on. What is it? So let me give you some background on what they are now calling COVID-19. It's a coronavirus. How many of you know what that is? Most of you know what that is. Okay, a few of you don't. A coronavirus is a virus that will move from an animal to a human. That's all that is. That's what it means. Any virus that can be communicated from an animal to a human is called a coronavirus. We've had several of them. We had the bird flu a while back. How many remember the swine flu? The bird flu. I went the swine flu too. And then the swine flu. Those are coronaviruses because they went from an animal to a human. We've had flus that have moved from dromedaries, that's one-humped camels, to people. Bats to people. Swine to people. Bats to people, that's a favorite one. Birds to people. So these viruses are viruses that communicate from an animal to a human. This one appeared first in Wuhan, China. The Chinese government tried to keep it quiet. They didn't want anybody to know that a new strain of flu had moved from animal to human, and they think it's from bats. But I guess, there's some sticky stuff here because some say, and they provide some interesting arguments to support the idea that this was something they were playing around with in a laboratory there in Wuhan, and it got away from them. And one of the doctors tried to tell people what was going on, and he got slammed by the communist government because they understood what that would do to them economically. So they were trying to control it, not let it get out. But it got out, obviously. Viruses are like that. There was a guy from America who was in Wuhan, China. He came home. He heard CDC report that this thing had broken out in China. He felt like he had some of the symptoms he should be concerned about. He went into the doctor, and they learned he did have it. And that's how it first showed up here in America. Well, they called it Chinese coronavirus. They called it the China coronavirus. They called it the Wuhan virus. Now, why do you suppose you would call it the Wuhan virus? It started in Wuhan. There's nothing mysterious about that. They call it the Chinese coronavirus because it started with the Chinese. That's how it started. If it started in Jerry Scheidbach, they would call it the Scheidbach virus. Okay? Or the Santa Maria virus or whatever. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? It's not like it's racist. It's just that's where it started. CNN, ABC, DEFGHI, all of them, repeatedly referred to it as the Chinese virus. They referred to it as the Wuhan virus. I mean, I sat and listened to a collection of clips, and I counted at least 20 times where on CNN, toward the end of December into January, CNN referred to it as the Wuhan virus. CBS referred to it as alternately, CBS, MSNBC, all those others, NPR, the rest of them, referred to it alternately, about evenly, between Chinese coronavirus and Wuhan virus. As soon as Trump steps onto the scene and refers to it as the China coronavirus or something, everybody, huh? Yeah, they thank you. They all cry racist. And they all start talking about how he's trying to change the narrative and make it about racism. That's your first clue as to what's really going on here. Remember, when something's going on that doesn't make sense, you stop and ask yourself, what sense does this make? The symptoms of COVID-19, CO for corona, V for virus, ID 19 or viral infection, disease, whatever. I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to do with that COVID-19, but it's the identification they use for this flu right now. The symptoms line up with your typical flu. Now I'm going to try to help you understand what's different about it And why? Well, the excuse some people are using to inflate this thing, I'll get into that in a minute. The average flu, how many of you have ever heard of influenza? How many of you have ever had the flu at any time in your life? The average flu kills thousands every year in America. Thousands. If you try to say that to anybody out there, they want to jump on you and attack you for trying to downplay the COVID-19. I haven't got there yet. Right now, I'm just telling you the facts, the truth. The truth is, your common flu or your influenza kills thousands of people every year. The range is anywhere from, on a really good year, you might get 15 or 20, to a real bad year, you might get 50,000 people. I mean, sometimes it gets real bad. How many times do you actually hear about that? You never hear about that. When was the last time they closed down church because of flu season? All right. So 10 to 30,000 die every year from seasonal flu, and sometimes it gets real bad. There are more than 10 million cases in America every year. In America, this flu season, this last flu season, before COVID-19 showed up, this last flu season, not from COVID-19, that's what I want to make sure I make clear. Other flu. Everybody say it together with me. Not COVID-19. Ready? Not COVID-19. Other flu. You realize that more than 10,000 people have died already this flu season? 10,000? Not 41? 10,000. Did any of you hear about that? Did anybody say, let's shut church down because 10,000 people died of the flu? Did anybody rush out and buy a warehouse of water and take away all the toilet paper so I couldn't find any? I'm kidding around, but did that happen? No. How does it compare? How does this COVID-19 compare with the swine flu of 2009, 2010? Which, by the way, then was billed as the worst pandemic since 1918, when the H1N1 flu jumped from a bird to human in 1918 and killed a whole slew of people. 675,000 were infected with that flu in 1918. In 2009, from about, I think it was March or so of 2009 to February 2010, the swine flu afflicted 20 million Americans. The swine flu put 275,000 plus into the hospital between 2009 and 2010. More than 12,000 people died of the swine flu. That's not counting anybody who died from any other influenza. 12,000 people died of the swine flu. Most of those who died by the swine flu were under 65 years of age. Children were particularly vulnerable to the swine flu. And you didn't know any of that. Not only did you not know it, do you not know it now, you didn't know it then. You didn't hear about it. Unless you're one of these crazy people that read everything that comes along that anybody prints. I'm going to show you some examples of the way the media handled that in just a moment. Now, we don't know how many are going to die from COVID-19. So far, it's something between 40 and 45. But the trend that they're looking at suggests that whereas the average flu fatality is almost totally limited to persons of advanced years with other health complications, 80 plus are particularly vulnerable to your average flu. Children rarely die from the flu. They get sick, but they rarely die. It's almost unheard of by the average flu. average flu is contagious before symptoms appear. These are trigger things that scare people. Oh, this flu, you can catch this flu from people before they even show symptoms. That's true of every flu. They don't tell you that. The swine flu, however, was unusual. As I pointed out, most fatalities were under 65. Children were at high risk of the swine flu, whereas COVID-19, the stats are closer in line with regular flu. How about that? Like the regular flu, COVID-19 is contagious before symptoms appear. And like the regular flu, the COVID-19 is particularly of concern and fatal to persons 80 years or older, and even then most of the time when there's a complicating problem other than the flu. They have diabetes, they have some kind of heart problem, they have, of course, when you're about 80 years old, you probably have those things. There are some differences, however, between COVID-19. It is considered to be more contagious than regular influenza, but only after symptoms appear. Isn't that interesting? In other words, you can have regular flu and be showing symptoms, and it's contagious, where COVID-19 right now, I'll explain this in just a minute, is showing symptoms. And between those two, at that time, at that stage, the COVID-19 is more contagious than regular flu after symptoms are showing. But COVID-19 is less infectious before symptoms appear. That's interesting, isn't it? So it's just odd. Let's take, COVID-19 and, let's just take swine flu. So COVID-19 before symptoms appear and swine flu before symptoms appear, you're more likely to get swine flu. Symptoms appear, well, then you're more likely to get COVID-19 after symptoms appear. One guy studying this said, COVID-19 might be the first pandemic that we could actually hope to control because of that feature. How many of you have heard that? Not even one person. Why didn't that make the news cycle? CDC said COVID-19 could be, quote, the first pandemic in history that could be controlled. That same article said H1N1 swine flu couldn't be controlled in 2009. You ready for this? But it was mild enough that this did not lead to disaster. That's a head scratcher. 275,000 in the hospital, more than 12,000 dead. And that wasn't a disaster? You know why? Those numbers aren't way out there beyond the pale of the regular flu. Those numbers are bad. But they were talking about the possibility of 120 million or 165 million, I think I read somewhere, dying from the swine flu worldwide. That's not how many who ended up dying. I think it's 575. I forget the exact numbers now, forgive me, but I'd have to dig through this stuff to get it, and that's what I was concerned about. I don't have time to do that. But COVID-19 is considered a much more dangerous disease than influenza right now because it's a new virus and the human body hasn't run its course. Here's what happens. These viruses get out there. The human body is not ready for them. They start attacking people, jumping from one to the other and doing this kind of thing. People start building up an immunity, and then they peter out and go kind of settle down into the family of other flu viruses. And there are, you guys know, you paid attention, you notice how they'll come out and say, Well, we're trying to figure out which vaccine we need for this flu season. Don't they always say that? Because there's a whole family of flus. They got to figure out which one's bothering us this year. And then they create their vaccine to attack it. In other words, what will happen eventually is, oh, I should back up and say, did you know the swine flu is still out there? Rooting around and oinking. Har, har. But it's still out there. All those flus are still out there. And they permutate too. They kind of change and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, all of that is to say, what's all the hype about? If something doesn't make sense, then what sense does it make? Well, let's look at some of the media, some of the media hype. There was a guy named Lawrence O'Donnell. Anybody familiar with him by any chance? Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC. I mentioned it this morning. He very seriously had a little segment in his show where he was telling people, very seriously, people are sick tonight because Donald Trump is the president. That's what he said. He followed that up with a real zinger. He said, people are dead and dying because Donald Trump is president. Who is the idiot that believes that? Who? That's what's scary about this is how many people are dumb enough to hear that and go, yeah, we got to get out of here. We got to get rid of him. Who hears that kind of stuff and thinks, oh boy, Trump's a bad man? I pointed out in my show, and I showed reasons that during the Obama administration, by the way, which is when the swine flu thing came out. During the Obama administration, I think he made some missteps, but I wouldn't blame him for the disease. I wouldn't. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the president and something like that breaks out. What are you supposed to be? Superman? You're supposed to stand up and go, I declare the virus dead. Okay, everybody, go back to everything. What do you do? So he probably did what was in his mind and according to what counsel he had available, the reasonable thing to do. And he did take some measures. He declared it to be a health emergency in April, the same month in which it broke out. It was April, that's right. The same month we had some people that died here, about 20 or something like that died here. And then he called it a health emergency. And then about 6 months later, he declared it a national emergency. And the declaration of the emergency issue has to do with how many federal departments and how much federal resources can be allocated to address the problem. Fewer federal resources are available at a health emergency. Full federal resources are available if it's a national emergency. So that's what the difference is. Well, by the time he declared it to be a national emergency, 1,000 Americans had died. And that's where Trump's coming from when he says that, Obama waited until 1,000 Americans died before he declared it a national emergency. And the media says, that's not true. Actually, it is exactly true. It's exactly the truth. The difference is that he did declare it to be a health emergency earlier. But that's the way it's always done. That's how you do it. You declare health emergency first and then national emergency second. That's just the way it's done. Okay. Other presidents who've dealt with this did the same thing. He did ask for some billions of dollars to help address it. I mean, Obama was trying to do some things about that. They had a vaccine they thought was going to save the day, and the government supposedly funded and put this thing together, but they couldn't get the vaccine to the hospitals fast enough. So people were just dying. We lost 12,000 people before it was all over. But when you look at the way the news handled it then as compares to how they handled it today, you start seeing the sense in this nonsense. You begin to see the sense in the nonsense. The day after the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus pandemic And that's, I don't know why people keep doing that. It's not a, anyway, you know what I mean. When they say coronavirus here, they mean COVID-19. In fact, when I see coronavirus, I'm going to put COVID-19 there just to clarify, so I don't have to explain it every time I look at it. When the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a pandemic, and President Donald Trump gave a national address, CNN's front page was almost entirely devoted to COVID-19. On the newsstands, 2/3 of the New York Times front page was devoted entirely to COVID-19 stories. The day before World Health Organization's declaration of a pandemic, for example, CNN posted a story calling the COVID-19 outbreak, quote, unprecedented in modern times, end quote. Unprecedented, really. Do CNN's reporters and editors not know about the flu pandemic of 1918, which was far worse, or, more recently, the swine flu in 2009? Although everyone seems to have forgotten the swine flu was even a thing, as I pointed out, it infected 61 million people in America, 60.8 to be more precise, from the spring of 2009 to early 2010. It claimed here, now it says, according to this guy says, according to Centers for Disease Control, it claimed as many as 18,000 lives. But the other reports I have are 12,469. And so I use the lower of the numbers, which is what I typically do. In total, the disease is now believed to have caused more than 200 deaths worldwide. But anyway, as of the writing here, and as my last look at this, in America we have about 1,800 cases, a little more, and about 40 to 44 deaths attributed to the virus so far. Swine flu. The swine flu was a serious outbreak during President Barack Obama's tenure. Serious enough to provoke him to declare it a public health emergency in late April 2009. The World Health Organization declared it to be a pandemic in early July, at which time 18,000 Americans had by then contracted the flu virus and 44 had died. And unlike COVID-19, the swine flu was more deadly to younger people. Obama declared a national emergency when the virus reemerged with a vengeance in the fall, and the press barely covered any of these events. When the World Health Organization declared the swine flu unstoppable on June 11, 2009, CNN didn't even lead with that story on its homepage. I ran out of time. I came in here all flustered. You saw that, discombobulated and all that because I ran out of time. I'm still adjusting to your 5 o'clock thing. Quite frankly, I'm still having trouble with that. And so I was going to show you a picture of CNN's homepage. And you'll see it's all about some guy that did this, that, or some officer, whatever. And then in a list of links, you have one little link, one in a whole list that talks about the swine flu. It's practically buried. A week later, there was no mention at all of the swine flu anywhere on CNN's homepage. Now, what's going on with COVID-19? 24/7, wall-to-wall. This is from the New York Times, March 2009. I had to be selective. There are hundreds of things I could have brought up, but I couldn't grab them all. In other words, I want you to understand, these two things I'm bringing to your attention here are just tip of the iceberg stuff. This is, however, genuinely and honestly representative of what I found when I asked the question and began research and said, how did the media handle the swine flu? This is representative of what I found. Warnings by public health officials this week that the spread of a new strain of H1N1 swine flu meant that a global pandemic was imminent were followed by the clarification that the word pandemic will be used even if the new virus turns out to cause mainly mild symptoms. Think about that. Is that the way they're reporting on COVID-19? Interesting, isn't it? Warnings by public health officials this week that the spread of a new strain of H1N1 flu meant that a global pandemic was imminent were followed by the clarification that, don't get shook up by the word, I'm adding that, right? But don't get shook up by the word pandemic. Calm down. This word is used even if the new virus turns out to cause mainly mild symptoms. The situation presented the world's news media with the conundrum: how loudly should a responsible person shout or whisper, "Possible fire," in a crowded theater? Do you get the tenor and tone of this article? New York Times, by the way, March 2009. That's just before it became a big deal. In April, before Obama mentioned anything about it. The question has been easy to answer for the broadcasters, websites, and newspapers that see the world in tabloid terms. In London, the free commuter newspaper Metro started its coverage on Sunday with the headline, "Swine flu could kill up to 120 million." That was the number, 120. I was trying to remember it. And that was over a picture of a Mexican police with masks and machine guns. Scary. Likewise, no one has been shocked that many anchors on our 24-hour-a-day cable news channels, which have a lot of time to fill, has spent a good deal of it hyperventilating. This is an article by New York Times criticizing those who were talking about this virus, even those who were talking about it in London. And he goes on to say, these days that is to be expected. After all, Jon Stewart makes a very good living pointing out night after night that those channels tend to overreact at some stage to almost every crisis they report. Of course, that's true. But my point right now is, isn't that interesting? New York Times is chastising those networks that were reporting. Monica Davey of the Times on SWU, flying fears, and he goes on. Anyway, he just gives a whole bunch of examples of people that he thinks were being hyperventilating. There was a really good one in here that I wanted to bring to your attention, but I'm not going to be able to find it without spending too much time standing up here reading stuff instead of talking to you. I'd rather be with you. But anyway, you get the gist. That gives you enough to understand what's going on. That was really early on. That was a message from a mainstream media mogul to all the other outlets. You'd better shut up. You better tampen this down. And that's what happened. The media coverage dwindled away to nothing. Just every now and then it would be brought up, a little update would be given, but it was always couched in language that said basically nothing really to be concerned about. If you wonder why you weren't particularly concerned about the swine flu when it was killing 12,000 Americans, now you know. Because you weren't told day after day after day how many people died today. Why is that? Well, that tells you what the sense is. I got a call from a friend whose son works with various representatives, congressmen, state senators, federal, in Washington, D.C., some of those guys. He got alarmed because of something he learned. He texted me and said, hey, my son was just involved in a conference call between CDC and the White House. And in the course of that conference call, it was revealed that Homeland Security has dispatched or deployed domestic disturbance squads in urban areas all over the country. And they're afraid they don't have enough. So the question becomes, what do they know that we don't know? In other words, there's a threat percolating out there, but is it from the COVID-19? Or is it from the reaction The media is ginning up using COVID-19. There it is. That's right. When something's going on and it just doesn't make any sense, because you look at COVID-19, you look at the real numbers, you look at everything, it doesn't even at this point come close to comparing to swine flu. There are good reasons. They've already got a vaccine in phase 1 testing, which according to Fauci, I believe that's how you say his name, of the National Institute for Health, said this is unprecedented. We've never been this far along in coming up with a vaccine responding to a new flu as we are today. But all of that is pushed aside. They want to blame Trump. Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and say it, huh? Amen? That's true. That's exactly what it is, Jackie. You're right. They are politicizing this thing. The left in this country wants to keep your attention away from something. When something doesn't make sense, you got to ask yourself, well, what sense does this make? What are they trying to do? You see, I'm convinced that these people who are ginning this up, they know it's going to flitter out because they're not going to get the numbers they're hoping for or that they need. Not that they're necessarily even hoping for it, but they're in a panic. You understand what I'm trying to say? They really are. They have been comfortably seated with power for so long. And then lately, it's beginning to be taken away from them, and they are freaking out. And what's really scary to them right now is that some of their luminaries that they've gotten behind and invested so much in have turned out to be real creeps. In fact, they've been creeps all along, but all of a sudden it's beginning to come out. Judicial Watch is doing a great job. I appreciate Judicial Watch. I didn't bring that with me. I should have, but I tell you, I just got too much going on in my little brain. But Stella brought something to me, and I'll bring it out Wednesday night, and you can start thinking about it right now, and then Wednesday we can take action on it. But Judicial Watch is doing good work. Judicial Watch has sued Hillary Clinton because they are a party who has been damaged by her behavior. So they have ground. So they're suing Hillary Clinton, and this has been going on for 6 years. And they finally got the court case to a place where the court has agreed that they have the right to depose, that is to question Hillary under oath. Now, she has appealed it. She's wiggled out of it for so far. But the wheel is turning, and it's getting real close. She's about that far from being exposed legally. She's been exposed. Everybody knows what that woman has done. But it's just putting together a case to make it have legal teeth is a little more complicated when you have somebody with the resources to keep wiggling around and hiding. That's the problem. So anyway, here's where we are. She's just that far from coming to justice. Judicial Watch sued Adam Schiff. Sued him. And that case is proceeding along very aggressively. And he's about to be brought to answer for serious allegations about abuse of power and all kinds of stuff that he did. Amen is right. Most of you didn't even know that. If you subscribe to Judicial Watch, and I have a subscription through Stella, but if you subscribe to Judicial Watch, and I think you should, you will be kept up to date on this kind of stuff as it goes along. But that's good news, and the media is freaking out. The whole establishment on the left is absolutely freaking out because that would really, really clinch it for Trump. And they know that. And so they are doing everything they can to beat drums and rattle cans and everything over. Look over here, look over here, look over here, look over here, look over here. They don't want you looking over there. They don't want any attention going there. And so when you're wondering what sense does this make, that's the sense it makes. A, they want to discredit Trump. B, their entire life is about one thing every day, from the moment they get up to the time they go to bed: stop Trump from getting reelected. They are of a value base that says whatever it takes. You need to understand that. These are the people who champion situation ethics. These are the people who live in the idea the truth is what you think it is. These are the people who do not have anything that supports anything like character. There's no infrastructure to support character in the Democratic Party today. It's just not there. It's completely gone. And if Trump did say to anyone, I don't know that he did, but if he did say, I'm concerned that some of these crazy journalists are going to go get the virus in order to get close enough to me to give it to me. If he did say that, he would be right to be concerned about it, because that's how desperate they are. Now, I don't know that that's happening, and I don't know that he said that. I can tell you, if I was in his shoes, if I hadn't said it, I'd have thunk it. Because that's how crazy these people are. I mean, you heard Bernie supporters, you heard what they're saying. If Bernie doesn't get the nomination, we're going to burn cities down. That's what they're saying. I mean, we're talking about people who are discussing this with another person and just out loud in front of God and everybody saying, yeah, there are a lot of serious Marxists in Bernie's party. I mean, in Bernie's campaign. And one guy says, I was out canvassing with one of them, and the guy was talking like, wow. At a certain point, we're just going to have to become militant about this. They were hoping they could get political control through Bernie so they wouldn't have to kill landowners. That's what he said. Well, if Bernie gets in and we can get control of things, we won't have to kill the landowners. What I want you to hear me say is, that's what we're up against. That's what's going on out there. If you want to try to figure out why somebody's concerned and they're planting domestic disturbance squads in urban areas, it's because they're anticipating something. And that's why we're going to pray. As I conclude, we're going to pray. Jesus said, remember I said I wanted to tell you the conclusion before I got there in case I didn't get there? It happened. So I want to remind you, Jesus said pestilences, earthquake, all that's going to come and go. You're going to have famines. You're going to hear about famine. That famine will pass. Another famine will come. You're going to hear about wars and rumors of wars. It's going to be on the newspapers, in the newspapers for the rest of your life. Somewhere there's war going on because the violent take it by force, and the Antichrist spirit is not content to yield to Jesus Christ as Lord. And that's why we're having all these wars. So what's going on? Wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, famines. That's the way it's going to be. But these things will all come and go. Be concerned about them inasmuch as they say. That's what Jesus said would happen. And that means we're in the beginning of sorrows. We're on our way. The young bride has a Braxton Hicks. Ho! False alarm. Yeah, but it tells you what's coming. Right? It is a reminder of what's coming. Just hadn't got here yet. That's the way to understand these things that are going on right now with pestilence and all that. The real concern isn't the bug. The real concern are the buggers. I'm not even sure what that word means. It's something the English use, and I'm not sure. I might have said a bad word. If I did, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to go look it up and find out. But I like to play with words like that, so I'm susceptible to that kind of thing. Let's stand together, please, as we conclude.